And welcome to the Ben Swann Radio Show here on RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. We'll be with you for the next 2 hours from 12 to 2 Eastern, as we are every Monday through Friday. I'm joined by my cohort here, Zach Bohannon. Zach, the music there was kind of interesting to get us started. Kind of sad, actually. To
sad. That is the music of wrestling superstar and icon, The Ultimate Warrior, who was this past weekend inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
We've been talking about that.
Yep, we've talked about him, the Dingo Warrior, as he used to be called back in the days of old. He made an appearance on Monday Night Raw, on WWE's flagship program, Monday evening. And then I got a little notice on my phone update today that he had passed away suddenly at the age of 54. He was apparently walking to or from his hotel, I don't remember which, with his wife, and just collapsed, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital when they got him to the hospital. So another tragic death in the wrestling world. It is a kind of a tragic business. So many wrestlers have died over the last several years. We've lost a ton, as you can imagine. The lifestyle, hectic, the demands on your body. Then when you throw in some steroids and other elements like that, it can be pretty potent. But,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to consider the fact that a lot of these guys obviously are on, HGH,
yes,
and, anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going into their systems aside from any other drugs they might be using.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a huge toll on your body, I'm sure, on your heart.
Mm-hmm.
The Ultimate Warrior was a guy who was famously oversized during his time, just
jacked.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sad. It's sad that it sounds like he was kind of starting to make a little bit of a comeback into his career. He's 54, you said?
54.
He certainly wasn't a young guy.
Certainly not a young spring chicken. I don't think that he was planning on getting back into the ring. He had some difficulty walking, as I could see it, when he made the appearance on Raw Monday night. But he seemed to have gotten some closure with the company, and was honored in the proper way, and sent off before he ended up passing away. One of my childhood favorites, that's for sure. I have an 8x10 black and white glossy photo of him as the champion, and I used to go to church with a guy who worked out with him at Gold's Gym.
Oh, really?
And so I think my parents and I prevailed upon this guy to get the Ultimate Warrior's autograph. And he did, little slip of paper, and then I still remember the note is attached to the picture of him, and it says, "Zach, feel the force, Warrior, 1990."
Nice.
At the height of his glory.
Nice. That's really cool.
That might be worth something someday. But
and the fact that he was willing to do it, sometimes you get these guys who have a lot of ego, and so very cool that he was willing to do that.
Yeah.
Kind of cool that he dated it too.
It is, yeah.
Most people don't date autographs.
Nope, they don't. So that I'll hang on to that. Maybe I'll pull that out, dust it off, and put it on my wall very carefully, and or maybe save it for my, when I have my man cave someday. One of those man caves with all my posters and pictures, and I'm sure that I'll be allowed to do that.
Very
someday.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. That's a cool thing. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that, and obviously thoughts with his family.
Yeah, 2 daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah, very sad.
As he goes through that.
Yeah.
Speaking of sad, we have a story that's actually breaking on benswann.com today. Just went up a few minutes ago. It's kind of a developing story, but a mass stabbing. Now, how often do you hear this? Mass stabbing at a high school in Pennsylvania today. The details on it are, coming in kind of slowly, but it sounds like, from what we understand so far, at least 20 students injured in this mass stabbing. According to witnesses, a 16-year-old high school student has now been taken into custody after violently stabbing at least 20 students at Franklin Regional High School in Murraysville, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. The stabbing occurred approximately at 7 a.m. Wednesday morning before classes were scheduled to begin. Witnesses say that the student was brandishing 2 knives and walked from classroom to classroom, stabbing other students with both knives. Quote, "I saw a girl with blood running out of her sleeve," said Zach Amsler, a junior. It was pretty mind-blowing. 8 people, 7 students, 1 adult were transported to Forbes Regional Hospital in Monroeville to be treated for serious injuries. Hospital spokesman Jesse Miller said all eight were in critical condition. That's incredible. How do you stab that many people before somebody stops?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
20 people stabbed. 1 adult, 7 students, an additional 8 people. The high school evacuated students were rushed to nearby middle school, and elementary school classes were canceled. Investigation is currently ongoing. This is going to be, I'm sure, politicized by both sides, right? So the guys, the gun grabbers, as we call them, will come out and say, well, see, if this had been an AR-15, so many more people would have died. Obviously, we hope that no one dies as a result of this. As I mentioned, there were 8 people in critical condition, which is incredible. But I think what it really goes back to, if you take the politics out of it, is that when you have someone who is disturbed, and when you have someone who is violent and wants to do harm to other people, they will find a way to do so. Whether it's carrying knives into a classroom or a gun. So these issues are not, as simple, and I think it does go back to the issue of too often we demonize the tool that's used, and we ignore the reality of the fact that there are disturbed people out there. Obviously, we don't know much about the student and whether or not he's on medication or, what his situation is, and certainly wouldn't want to jump to conclusions on that. But it does go back to the point that when people intend on doing evil things like this, the intention is not created by the tool. It is the tool that's used to carry out the intention. And I think this is a strong example of that.
That's right. That was my first thought upon reading this story. Well, guns kill people. Well, so do knives. So do knives. And like you said, if somebody wants to do it and they're disturbed, they just do it. And so I'm sure there's going to be an outcry from the progressive gun grabbers saying, "Let's outlaw knives." Don't you bet or no?
Right, no, right. That's never going to happen, right?
No.
They have no interest in that because it doesn't fit into. In fact, I would say you'll get a very small portion of people who will talk about it in media, probably today and tomorrow. But will we see weeks and weeks and weeks of knife coverage? The CNN special, Knives in America. No, we're not going to get that because it doesn't fit the agenda.
Yeah, don't cook with them. Don't use them in your kitchen. Don't use butter knives. Yeah, we're not going to see that.
Will we see somebody step forward and say, and now we have a situation where parents need to be held responsible for having knives out where kids can reach them? The parent needs to be charged here because clearly they were not taking care of those knives properly.
Clearly.
Putting them where they needed to be.
Yeah.
That won't happen. Somebody just tweeted to me, Bill Benson says, "Where's Piers Morgan on this issue?"
Right. Inspired.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Piers has other things to worry about than just picking on this issue. But yeah, I mean, it's the reality of what we'll see. It'll get some headlines today and tomorrow, maybe. Probably more local headlines than anything. It'll get a little bit of attention and then it'll move on and on to the next thing. It will not be weeks and weeks of coverage about how we have to take care of the knife epidemic, the growing knife epidemic, and how we've got to ban or outlaw knives in order to protect who? The children.
Well, in the meantime, we do pray for the children. Our thoughts and prayers go out to those folks in Pennsylvania and
for the family of this young man who carried out this attack.
Yes, that's right.
As well, and for him as well.
Him as well.
Yeah.
All of the above. You're right. All of the above.
Yeah. So. All right. Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to be talking at the bottom of the hour with the author of a great book. We told you about it yesterday. You can download it for free at benswann.com. The GOP Civil War, Will Freedom Win? Which you can go to benswann.com right now and you can download through Amazon your own free copy of it. We'll be talking with the editor of that book and getting some insight from him at the bottom of the hour. Plus, on the other side of this break, some questions on the survey for middle school students that misled parents. Yeah, we'll tell you about that when we come back. Welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show here on RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Before the break, we told you about the situation in Pennsylvania, a mass stabbing, as they're calling it, that took place at a high school in Pennsylvania just outside of Pittsburgh this morning before classes started. It was around 7 o'clock in the morning, and a 16-year-old apparently walked into the school holding 2 knives, stabbed as many as 20 people, 8 people in critical condition at this hour. been seeing some of the tweets on my Twitter page, and people are saying exactly what I expected them to say. Where's Piers Morgan? Oh, better ban guns. Ban the kitchen knives. And can we now make America a knife-free zone? And as we expect, look, it's not to make light of this. It's not to put down, the tragedy that's taken place here, or to make light of it in any way. This is the problem that media has created. Right, media, I think, is more responsible for this kind of response from people than anything, simply because every time there is a shooting, it immediately becomes the evil tool that is a gun has managed to creep out of a cabinet someplace and is seeking vengeance upon its masters. And so this is, I think, the response that you get. And it's unfortunate. Obviously, as we mentioned, we're our thoughts and prayers with the families of those young people who were stabbed, of the young man who did this, and he himself. Our thoughts with him as well. Whatever drove him to this, but again, it goes back to illustrate the point that you do not attack or blame the tool that is used when someone commits a violent or evil act, and that's what we have to keep our eye on. Okay. So this other story we have up today, BenSwann.com, this school misleads parents on survey questions for students. What kinds of questions? What kinds of questions are we talking about? Well, it's a survey that came from the Search Institute, and it was given to kids in Bedford, New Hampshire. The Bedford, New Hampshire School Board met with frustrated parents over a provocative survey that was given to middle schoolers at the Ross L. Lugerio Middle School. Several parents found the survey contained inappropriate questions that delved deeply into the personal lives of their children, some as young as 11 years old. The survey came from Search Institute, titled Profiles of a Student Life, Attitudes and Behavior, and it was given to 7th and 8th graders to fill out. Out of the 160 questions, there were many in-depth inquiries pertaining to sexual activity and preference, suicide, drug use, and physical abuse. Parents are upset by the way the school chose to handle notifying parents of the survey. Richard Giard of Giard at Large at Manchester, New Hampshire radio program was able to obtain notification that was mailed out by the school and is available for you to view. You can check it out at BenSwann.com. You can click on that link so you can see it. The letter to parents completely neglected to mention the questions about sexual activity and other controversial topics. Giard was also able to receive a copy of the survey itself, which, again, is available there at BenSwann.com. So what's on this survey? Attitudes and behaviors. Let's see, how old are you? That's not too bad.
Not bad.
What grade are you in? Would you say that you are only straight / heterosexual? Mostly straight / heterosexual? Bisexual? Mostly lesbian gay? Only lesbian gay? How would you describe yourself? And it goes into your ethnicity. Which of the following describes your family? And asks about family relationships. One birth parent or one adoptive parent, foster parents, grandparents. Sometimes live with my mom, sometimes live with my dad. Let's see, it goes on here. How do you agree with punishments at school? How many days of school have you skipped? How do you feel when you're in class? Bored?
I would check
yes.
that. Yes.
So it goes on and on, right? There's a kind of a list of things there that you can check out.
Alcoholic beverages. Do you smoke tobacco? Smoke marijuana? What's your attitude toward those?
At 11. You 11-year-old.
11-year, yeah. How frequently have you smoked cigarettes during the past 30 days? Half a pack, 1 pack, 1.5 packs.
These are important questions for the school to know.
Critical.
They need to know these things.
Crucial.
Because how are you going to be able to pass math if you do not, I don't know about your sexual orientation?
I don't know.
But while parents were able to opt their children out of taking the questionnaire, they were outraged by the convoluted methods that the school district used to avoid disclosing the full contents of the survey. So you can opt out if you don't want your kid to take the survey, but we're not going to tell you exactly what the survey is. That would be a problem. Anne-Marie Banfield, a resident of Bedford, told BenSwann.com that she was told by the school superintendent that the survey's purpose is to ensure that they are following the school's mission statement. Banfield was concerned about the way the matter was brought forth and handled. If we can't trust the school to properly administer a survey to students, how can we trust them to administer programs using this information? Ba-bam.
Bam.
Well said, Anne-Marie.
Well done.
The school said they have been using this survey every 4 years for the last 16 years.
Oh, well then, by all means, continue
what are you
the
complaining
tradition.
about, Anne?
Yeah.
Sit down and take your medicine.
That's right. We know what's best for you, but we're not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Parents, okay, so you've been doing this survey now, giving it out every 4 years for the last 16 years, okay? But, so it shouldn't be a big deal, but while the parents were able to opt out of their children taking the questionnaire, they were not told exactly what was in the questionnaire, right? That's the first part. But this, get this, parents were also not allowed to take the survey home for review. You may opt out, but you can't see it. Well, why can't I see it? How do I know what I'm opting out of? Just, listen, if you want to be a bad parent and not have your kid participate, fine. Well, let me see the survey. No, you can't see it. Just trust us. It's fine.
I would never do that. That would be my first clue. If they wouldn't let me see the survey, oh, okay. Right. I'm not doing it.
Exactly, right?
Not having my kid do it.
So let's go one step further here. Beyond that, some parents had to file several right-to-know requests to get a hard copy of the survey.
Unbelievable.
We have a right to know what you're... Nope, you don't have a right to know. We have to file a right-to-know request in order to be able to access the survey that you're giving to our kids at the middle school of 160 questions. Incredible. It's because we want to know what's going on in your home, and we don't want mom and dad to know that we're asking questions about what's going on in your home. That's what it comes down to.
It's right. It's the school exercising control, taking the place of the family.
Yep.
Basically, which has been
the school becomes the authoritative figure.
Exactly.
And we have to create a separation between the student and the parent because parents sometimes get in the way of us having
getting our
interaction with
agenda. Yeah. Can we just do away with the Department of Education? Can we please do that?
Wouldn't it be great?
In a perfect, I dream about that often. I fall asleep dreaming about that.
Do you? I fall asleep dreaming about lots of things. I've never actually fallen asleep to that.
Okay, I'm exaggerating, but it is a pipe dream of mine, and I think that it would take care of some of this nonsense, but not all, but some.
Well, I think it would. I think it would have a huge effect, without question, on what's happening in our country. It would have an effect on how we deal with a lot of these issues. And it really comes down to the individual over the collective, right?
Exactly.
So that's what this survey is about. It's about the collective versus the individual. Now, a little segue here because we've been telling you the last couple of days about this book that you can get a free copy of downloaded through benswann.com. If you just go there, you click on the homepage, you'll see this banner at the very top, the Republican Party's Civil War, Will Freedom Win? And so, we're looking at this and encouraging people, go there and download this copy. It's a great book. And it talks about this three-way battle that's taking place in the Republican Party right now. There's a dramatic transformation of the GOP into a forward-looking party. How do we get there? After the break, Ed Hudgins with the Atlas Society will be on with us live for the next hour talking about this book and what it's about. It is a fantastic read, and it brilliantly breaks down for you this battle. We're going to talk with Ed after the break, but go to benswann.com, download your own free copy right now. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show here on RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Glad that you're with me. I got to tell you, going back to 2012, the first part of 2012, watching the Republican primaries in that system. And that's where a lot of people, by the way, got to know me and came to know who Ben Swann was during that time. I was working for the Fox affiliate here in Cincinnati and doing a segment called Reality Check and talking about this fight really between the supporters of Congressman Ron Paul, who were working really valiantly to get him elected, against the establishment Republicans, not establishment voters, but the establishment controlling the system, who were really pushing back and attempting to prevent Congressman Paul from getting the nomination. And not just that, but really working to suppress the voice of the grassroots. And so as I started really covering this, what I found was this incredible divide that I had no idea was even there. And most people, I don't think, had any idea was there. I think a lot of media had talked about there was a growing divide between the so-called Tea Party. Now, the Tea Party, remember, that was started by Ron Paul. A lot of people don't remember that. They think that the Tea Party came about through, all these different kind of neoconservative grassroots groups. It wasn't. It was actually a Ron Paul movement was the original Tea Party in 2010, which then turned into more of a social conservative movement. But it started out as a taxed enough already. That's what T stood for. Taxed enough already. It was about taxation without representation. And so some people were familiar with that idea. And then as we began to watch this unfold, I began to realize, no, there's more to it than this. There's actually a bigger divide happening here between these so-called libertarian Republicans or liberty Republicans or libertarians who had become Republicans just so they could vote for Ron Paul. And there was this divide between them and the establishment. And so we've watched this develop now. And at the time, by the way, I remember talking about this in my newsroom that I was working in, and I was told I was crazy. Like, you're nuts. That's not happening here. Who are these people? And these Ron Paul people, there's only a few of them, and they're a few crazies, right? Now all of a sudden, it's no. It's totally different. Now there is this force of people that are the liberty wing of the Republican Party who are rapidly becoming the power in that party. But I've also talked about this issue, and I mentioned this the other day, but as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I was on with Abby Martin on RT. We were talking about CPAC, and, glad to be a guest on her show, and we were talking about this issue. And I said, she asked me, so what do you think about the divide between the Republican Party and the establishment and the kind of social conservatives? And I said, or the libertarians, she said. And I said, actually, Abby, I think it's a three-way divide. And virtually no one's talking about this, but what's happening in the Republican Party is a three-way divide between what I would say are the neoconservatives and the establishment folks. I would also call them really the crony part of the Republican Party. How do we enrich ourselves? How do we work deals for our buddies? How do we create legislation that controls other people, not for the sake of actually trying to control their lives, but so that we can make a buck off of it? Then you have the social conservatives. A lot of them are evangelicals, and that's the side that says, look, we have religious conviction. We believe the Republican Party best supports our convictions. But they're also strong believers in limited government, strong believers in getting government out of their lives on some levels. In other levels, some of those evangelicals want to see government, like they're supporters of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, so they want to see some government involvement. And then you have the liberty Republicans who say, well, no, we want government out of all of it. And it's not fair, I think, to totally say, well, evangelicals are in one group and libertarians in another, because you have a lot of crossover. You've got a lot of young evangelicals who are part of that liberty movement who say, well, we, as part of the liberty movement, we want government out of everything. And that's part of our religious beliefs. So I was really excited when I found out the Atlas Society had put together this book, The Republican Party's Civil War, and Will Freedom Win is the title. It is a brilliant book. If you have not gone to benswann.com and downloaded a copy, you can click on the link there at the very top. It's the banner running across the top. You get a free download from Amazon. It is a fantastic read and a book that I think has its finger right on the pulse of what is happening. And on the phone with me right now is Ed Hudgins with the Atlas Society. He's also the editor of the book and had a huge hand in putting this thing together. Ed, thanks so much for joining me.
Glad to be with you today.
We talked a little bit yesterday, kind of in prep for this conversation today. I told you then, and I think, reiterated it. But I was so delighted just to see the cover of your book. The cover of the book with three fists in different directions, I thought was brilliant, because I think you guys have really, as I mentioned, you've captured the essence of what is happening in the Republican Party right now.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, we hear in the media, there's this fight between the social conservatives, limited government conservatives, Tea Party conservatives, and the more responsible Romney, McCain wing of the party, and that's simply inaccurate. We really do have these three factions of the party: the establishment conservatives, who basically or establishment Republicans who simply want to make the welfare state work a little bit better, and maybe even expand it. I mean, let's remember what Bush 2 did, with the No Child Left Behind, with Prescription Drug Act. He was basically trying to pretend like he was a liberal and expand government. Then you have the social conservatives who fall into several categories. A lot of them are limited government, but there are some who really put their priorities on a moral, often religiously motivated agenda, which often focuses on limiting liberty. I would say obsesses with this sort of thing. And then there are what I'd call the libertarian Republicans, Goldwater Reagan Republicans, constitutionalists, and so forth, all of whom understand that the welfare state is in collapse. Our freedom is in collapse. The only question is how quickly it collapses if we keep in the path we're going now. And that path, by the way, is being pioneered, you might say, by the establishment Republicans, who just, they don't want to get rid of the welfare entitlement programs. They just want to make them work a little bit better. Well, all that's going to do is delay the collapse. But, I should put this in a bigger context for your listeners. I talk about a civil war within the GOP between these three factions. And one of the real tragedy is the background of this civil war is a civil war within the United States. This country is in a civil war. It's a civil war between the makers and the takers, a civil war between the producers and the expropriators, a civil war between those whose morality says it is good and moral for you to go out and work for your own living, to make your own way, to take care of yourself, to take care of your own family and so forth, and enjoy life. And then there are those who say, I'm entitled. My neighbor has to provide me with fill in the blank, whatever it is. And more we're becoming a country where political power is in the hands of the takers, who simply get their cronies and friends in Washington to give them more benefits. And these takers are not just welfare queens.
Yeah.
These takers are businesses as well. These takers are Solyndra, Obama cronies who basically took, $750 million, for a failed solar energy project. And they're on the Republican side as well. The establishment Republicans have their fingers in the pie too. And what this does is take a look at the premium, or the medium of exchange, you might say, between these two groups, the makers and the takers. If it's the makers, if I want you to give me your money, I've got to provide a good a service that you're willing to say, hey, this is good, I'm going to hand you my money so I can get something, okay? So I've got to satisfy you if I want to make a living, right?
Yeah.
Then so it's basically production and free trade, mutual exchange that's the coin of the realm, so to speak. Then there's the expropriators. What's the coin of the realm in this case? It's power. It's raw political power. It's I need to get someone to be able to tell you whether you like it or not, you're going to hand the following over to me. Or whether you like it or not, you're going to raise your kids in the following way. Or whether you like it or not, here's how you're going to run your business, and here's what benefits you're going to offer, and it doesn't matter what you or your employees agree upon. That's neither here nor there. It's who has the power who makes that decision. It's raw power. It's a fist. And, of course, it creates a downward spiral, because the more power becomes the medium of exchange, the less premium there is on actually producing goods and services. People put more time and effort into getting political favors, meaning there's less to go around, meaning that there's even more of an incentive to go and use politics rather than production. And it's this downward spiral. We see it in Europe. We see the countries of Europe going bankrupt just this way.
No, you're making an excellent point. Stay there, Ed. We're going to have much more on the other side of the break. But I want to continue that thought with you, because the famous Mitt Romney talking about the 47% that he mentioned, he only got half the story. And I think that's where you're filling in the other half of it. Much more with Ed, but go to benswann.com, click on the link, and get your own free download copy of the Republican Party Civil War, Will Freedom Win? Ed Hudgins is on with us today. He is with the Atlas Society. He's also the editor of a book we've been telling you about this week called The Republican Party's Civil War. Will freedom win? That's, I guess, the question we're all hanging on, Ed. You know, before the break, I think you were making an excellent point, because too often we have this left-right divide in politics, in media, which, you know, as you know, that's one thing that we're working every day to try to overcome, is this left-right divide. But one of the things that left-right paradigm tells us is that you have takers and you have producers. And the takers are the people with the D's in front of their names, and the producers are the people with the R's in front of their names, right? So the Democrats are always taking. They're all on welfare. Mitt Romney gets up during the 2012 campaign and talks about the 47, 48, 49% of the population who doesn't pay any federal income tax at all. And so the president has a huge advantage going into it. And you're making a great point, though, that when we talk about welfare, there are really multiple groups here. Yes, you have the people on the low end of the spectrum who rely on a system of welfare, but those at the very top of our system also rely on welfare, and they do so, as you said, not through producing products and merchandise and technologies that the public demands, but instead they use the political system to require people to either purchase their products or to cut out competition. They're on the top end of it.
Yeah, no, this is exactly right. This is why, as I say, it's really a war between the makers and the takers, and it's Republicans and Democrats. You know, one of the most serious problems, and I outlined this in my book, is that too many people do not know the difference between what I call crony capitalism and real capitalism, or real free markets. A real free market means you go out, you create a good or service, you offer yourself in the market, you create an iPhone, you create whatever it is, you give it a shot. You know, if it works, great. You make a lot of money. If it doesn't work, well, you go on, you try something else, okay? Versus you get a government grant to do it, and if it fails, well, you know, hey, you know, government failures are usually rewarded with even more grants and more handouts, or you get a favor from the government. That's
absolutely right. It's not free market, but one of the reasons that people don't understand, I think, the difference between cronyism and capitalism is because there is no capitalism left in the United States. Every form of even so-called capitalism, we have so much state regulation and associations that come together and say, well, in order for you to open up a moving company, right, you've got to be able to get approval from other moving companies. I mean, it's all cronyism. There is no capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah, or it's let's say it is a disappearing thing. And by the way, what's interesting is that one of the things I have, you'll see in the first chapter of my book, I cite a survey that's quite startling. It used to be that, you know, if a politician said this is a socialist measure, you know, people would kind of prickle it. Well, I don't like socialism. That's not a very good thing, is it? Well, there's a survey that shows that if you look at adults and their reaction to the words capitalism and socialism, for most adults, socialism, 60% of adults have a negative view of the term socialism. Only 31% have a favorable view. But if you look at people 18 to 29, 49% have a positive view of the word socialism, 43% a negative view. And then if you look at the term capitalism, you find almost the same sort of thing, where actually a slight, a bigger number of percentage of young adults have a negative view of the word capitalism. So because the term has been so distorted, because the reality is that we really are living in a crony system. And let me say something else about the crony system. It's seductive. In other words, let's take a look at the middle class. We can rant against people who, you know, welfare queens and people who, game the system, and that's quite valid. Mm-hmm. But take a look at middle class people who start off by saying, I'd like to make it on my own. But, you know, I mean, because the tax burden is so high, or the regulatory burden, which is hidden, by the way, is so high, which is probably as big as the tax burden, I'm just having trouble making it. And then the government comes along and says, okay, look, here's what we'll do. We're going to help your kid pay for college. How's that sound? And they might not like the idea, but it's like, hey, look, I pay my taxes. I'm in this system. I might as well take the free Benny. Mm-hmm. And then the same sort of thing with Social Security. Well, it's hard to save for retirement because real incomes have been going down under Obama. Well, okay, I guess if they up my Social Security benefits or my Medicare, Medicaid benefits or whatever, I guess I might as well go ahead and take that. So what happens is people who might otherwise not want to take government benefits feel like, look, I paid into the system, I got no choice, I'm going to get involved. And then what happens, unfortunately, is for some, there's a flip that well, okay, I'm getting this because I paid into it and the government has to give it back to me, to a flip of I'm entitled to it. So when you look at that 47% that Romney was speaking about, I think his strategic mistake was to say, I know that a lot of you in the 47% category would prefer not to be there.
Yeah.
I know you don't like being on the dole. I know it bothers you because you're moral people and you want to make it on your own, but you feel you have no alternative and it's your kids that are at stake and your life that's at stake. What I want to do is change the whole bloody system. And that's what he didn't know how to do, and what unfortunately too few Republicans have figured out they have to do if they want to win elections, and that is to appeal to these people who would prefer not to be there. And, of course, it also means to say to Republicans and Democrats alike, we're going to change the crony system so that your business is not rewarded because you got political pull and political power. That's also important.
Absolutely it is. You're making a great point, though, which is that so many people, when they look at these terms, cronyism, capitalism, socialism, communism, what we've done is we've turned them into these very strong, almost slurs that are used against people. But you talked about young people. I don't know if you ever watch a show on HBO called Vice. It's a pretty well done show. The guys who do it, they go around the world and they tell interesting stories. They clearly have a very progressive, lean, I think, to a lot of their ideology, which is fine. But it comes through in some of what they do. And an example, they were in India for one of these stories, and they're out in this massive slum, something like 12 million people living in this one slum, open sewers, basically just it's like a shanty town. And there's millions of people there. And then there's this one gigantic building that shoots up kind of on the edge of all of it, and it's something like 34 or 36 stories tall. And it's a private residence that belongs to the wealthiest man in this particular city. And so as they're talking about this, they say that this is an example of capitalism, right? This is capitalism. And that's what the people in India are frustrated with, the capitalist system that allows them to all live this way while this one guy lives like this. And I'm yelling at the TV going, that's not capitalism. Because the guy who has this has it because of his arrangement with government that allows him to corner the market and control the market forces in India. He has something like, 100% of the market in telecom and cell phones and that kind of thing, right? Which is the same case in Mexico. You get one guy like Carlos Slim who controls the entire, cell phone industry there, and no one else can compete because government cuts special deals for certain people. But that's what they think capitalism is. And because they've been told that's capitalism, they believe it, and so socialism sounds better because it sounds like an equalizer. It's not an equalizer. It's just an enslaver.
That's right, yeah, and I cut my teeth at the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute, among other things. I created the idea of an index of economic freedom at Heritage, and other people operationalized it. There's also a version that the Cato Institute puts out, and so I did a lot of work with third world countries, traveling to some of these places that you mentioned, and one of the things that we had to do was to explain, here's what real free enterprise means. Real free enterprise, for example, is what you folks in Tanzania are doing when you set up a little stand and, sell stuff and make stuff. It's what you people in Peru do when you ignore all the government regulation and, set up your own enterprise. That's what real free markets are. That's what
free markets are. Ed, don't go anywhere. Much more with Ed Hudgins when we come back. But if you have not yet, go to benswann.com, click on the link, get your own free copy. How do you like that for capitalism? Get a free copy of the Republican Party's Civil War, Will Freedom Win? And we are back on the Ben Swann Radio Show for our second hour. Got to put up for one more hour with us. Now, we'll be with you again tomorrow, 12 to 2. But as we get into our second hour here, excited to have on the phone with us today Ed Hudgins with the Atlas Society. He is also the editor of a brand new book being put out by the Atlas Society. It is called The Republican Party Civil War, Will Freedom Win? If you're just tuning in, you haven't heard the first part of this, you can go to benswann.com and you can click on our podcast and listen into the first part. Ed is a guy who I think absolutely has his finger on the pulse of some of the problems that we're facing in the country. And it's bigger than a Republican thing. It's bigger than a Democrat thing. It's bigger than a libertarian thing. The problems that we face today in America really come down to a crony system. And how do we defeat that? And unfortunately, Ed, I think one of the realities we don't talk about enough is that it is a painful process to let go of cronyism. It is a painful process to let go of dependency, because those who are in power continually create, as you were alluding to before, they continually create a situation that is difficult for people to survive in, so that we have dependency upon them in order just to be able to get by. And so when you unravel that system, it is not an easy, simple, or even fun process. It's a hard process, is it not?
No, that's true. I mean, remember, the paternalists and the cronyists are like the doctors who break your legs, and then they charge you a very high price for some diluted aspirin to supposedly deal with the pain. That's the nature of the system we're in today. But I think and you're right, any kind of a change, I mean, remember, it took us decades to get into the mess that we're in today. But I would suggest this. I would suggest a broader vision that gives us both a political path forward and an economic path forward that can make that transition a lot easier. First, let me say something about the political path forward. I've argued that the GOP has got these three competing factions: the establishment Republicans, who want to keep the welfare state. Though I think some of those establishment Republicans, if you really pinned them down, would say, look, we don't like the welfare state, but we just don't see any alternative to it. Of course, they're part of the problem. It's because they don't speak up. Second, you have social conservatives. A lot of the social conservatives put limiting government, getting back to the Constitution and so forth first, but unfortunately there's some, like Mike Huckabee or Rick Santorum, who put a social agenda first, and have even threatened to leave the Republican Party if their needs or demands are not met, so to speak. And then you have the libertarian, Reagan, Goldwater, classical Republican who wants limited government. Those are the three factions that are in combat now. How do we deal with that situation? I want to see leadership that says to the extreme social conservatives, guys, that you're not going to win on many of these issues anyway, like same-sex marriage. But what you're going to do is you're going to continue to empower the Obama people and folks like that to take the country down a very bad path. Now, by the way, I've been 30 years working in public policy. I've been 3 years as a father of fraternal twin girls. By the way, there's one picture in my book. It's of my girls. So if you download the book today or tomorrow, you can see pictures of my darling little girls. I got skin in the game. I want to see them have a good future. So do a lot of social conservatives. They want their children to have a good future. If they continue to focus on their social issues at the expense of limiting government, they're simply empowering the bad guys. But here's the other point I want to make. There are folks who would probably be in the Republican Party if it were a more open and inclusive party. Young people, first of all. There's interesting, because in the last primary, the 2012 primary, during that spring primary, there were two groups that had a favorable opinion of Ron Paul. I'm assuming Ron Paul is kind of the proxy for a pro-freedom view.
Yes.
They were the classic Ron Paul, young Republican/libertarian supporters, and they were disillusioned young Obama backers who saw Ron Paul as an honest, genuine candidate. You can disagree with Ron Paul on particular issues, okay, but the point is, there are young people who would want to be in a more inclusive Republican Party, and instead, at the convention in Florida in 2012, they basically got the back of their hand. The establishment said, "We want nothing to do with you." Another group, and this is where we get into your question about a transition away from the welfare state. There is another group in this country that the Republicans are ignoring at their own expense. These are the entrepreneurial wealth creators, the people who are like the Steve Jobs types, who I like to say, if you're familiar with Ayn Rand, our phone number, by the way, is 202 Ayn Rand. They got the spirit of a Howard Roark, but they don't quite have the politics of a John Galt. They understand the power of human reason to change the world. Look at what it's done with the communications and information revolution. You can look at a lot of the medical technology that's coming down the road. You can look at incredible technology going forward created by these people who understand the power of human reason. They understand the individual is the driving force of progress, and they love their work. These are the people who are creating the new economy, who probably would be in the Republican Party or a liberty-leaning party, but they're not going to be in a party that they conceive as, or they perceive as being bigots. So if politically the folks like the Huckabees and Santorums are told either get with the Freedom Program or get out of the way, then you're going to attract some of this new blood. That's going to help win elections. It's also going to be these folks who are going to create the new economy or continue to create the new economy that's going to ease that economic transition, because there are going to be so many opportunities for young people. Well, wouldn't this be great? So you've got that opportunity sitting right there if Republicans would just understand it. And I go into gory detail about this in my book. Well, not that gory, actually. It's, and by the way, I'll say to your listeners, download the book for free today or tomorrow, and go on Amazon. And if you want to be part of the solution, you want to have an impact, rate the book and review the book. Put your comments there, because that'll help more people come across the book on Amazon and buy the book or download the book, and hopefully you'll have this cascade effect where these ideas will be getting out. You can help. You, the listener, can help by just doing that. Download the book for free, rate it, put your comments up there, and that's going to help other people find the book and
it will
get
push
these
the
ideas
book up.
out.
Absolutely.
It'll push the book up, and you can go to the Ben Swann website, and right up there, I believe, we got a banner ad for it. So take a look, folks, at Ben Swann.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to benswann.com, you can get it there for free. And as Ed was saying, look, it's a book that I believe is the list price on it's $10. And you can get it for free. So I'll tell you what you can do. Go there, get the book for free, then take that $10 and support our Truth and Media projects with it.
There we go.
You can move it over there, because I know you wanted to spend the $10 anyways. No, that's really a really good point, Ed. I think we're coming up on a break here again.
Okay.
But one of the things that I think is important, especially for the folks like, for instance, the Mike Huckabees and the Rick Santorums. Look, if you say, look, I don't believe in gay marriage, one of the problems that you put yourself into this position is when they've used government as a way of saying we need to stop it. Now government has turned on them, and so for all the pastors out there who don't believe in gay marriage, the same people who they were relying on to stop gay marriage are now going to force them to participate in gay marriage ceremonies. Yeah. Because they opened that door up and they said, you know what, we want government to be involved. Well, now the government's there. They say, wait a minute, this is a civil rights issue, not a religious issue. And so, look, in Washington and Arizona, across the country, there are people who are wedding photographers, who are florists, who are being told by law you cannot, by virtue of your conscience, opt out of these ceremonies. And the reason for that is because the religious right was duped into letting government into those situations. Yep. And now they're paying the price for it. I think where we can all agree is you don't have to agree with someone's lifestyle to say I want government out of those decisions, because ultimately what government wants is for no one to have freedom of conscience, no one to have freedom of choice.
Yep. If you forge a sword, you better assume that Barack Obama or someone you don't like is going to wield that sword, folks.
That's exactly how it works. Ed, stick around. We'll be back on the other side of the break. But, folks, as he mentioned, just go to benswann.com, click on that ad, and you can get a free copy of this book. And not just that, get some of your family members who are asleep on this issue. Get them over there so they can read it as well and understand the coming Liberty Civil War. Well, we're kind of in the middle of it, right? Much more on the other side of the break. Kind of triumphant music there, Zach.
Angels and Airwaves, buddy.
You're all about those guys.
All their stuff is triumph.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We are on the phone with Ed Hudgins. He is with the Atlas Society and the editor of a book that we've been pushing to you throughout this week. We'll continue to push it to you. If for no other reason than the fact that this is one of the few books that you're going to read that really understands what we're dealing with in the Republican Party. It is not a fight between just simply two factions. It is a complicated. It's not even just three clearly defined factions either, Ed, as you know, and you point out in the book. It's messy. Right, you get people who kind of cross over between groups. I think the key to all of this, the key to winning, is the acceptance of freedom, because ultimately if we can get the evangelical Tea Party and social conservatives on the same side as the more libertarian-leaning or libertarian Republicans, if we can get them to work together, to agree, because, look, we all know, if you step back from it, they have much more in common than they have that they're fighting over. Right, the desire for freedom, I think, is much stronger. If we can pit that group against the establishment crony part of the party, then I think you win. You just got to get them talking to each other.
Yeah, I have a chapter in the book, by the way, that's called "Memo to Social Conservatives," and I mean, I'm secular myself. I'm obviously libertarian. I'm an objectivist, but as I mentioned, I am the father of these wonderful, adorable 3-year-old twin girlies, and so my values personally probably overlap with a lot of the values of social conservatives. I want to raise my girls in a certain kind of world, in a certain kind of way. I want them to be certain kind of individuals when they grow up. And so I suspect there's a lot of common ground. But, as we said in the last segment, that common ground has to be based on freedom. It can't be based on me saying, I want the government to help in the following way, because you know what's going to happen. The government is going to end up screwing things up. I mean, how can you think that a government that is so incompetent in virtually every area is going to be able to step into family values and do anything but screw them up? I mean,
right.
Are you kidding?
Well, the problem is you can't legislate morality. You can punish people for bad behavior, but you can't legislate to prevent people from doing bad things. And look, generationally, the social conservatives are losing that battle anyways, going to government in order to be the answer to it. And I think even when you talk about a faith issue for people of faith, no part of Christian faith says that you demand people act a certain way. Yeah. It's to compel them through your lifestyle, through education, through exhortation, through teaching, through the relationships that you build. At least I think in a Christian, maybe in a older Judaism, there might be law that's required, but we don't follow that. I mean, you don't stone your child today if they talk back to you. At least. Yeah.
By the way, I like to say, if you don't like gay marriage, then don't marry a gay. I mean, if that's your thing, okay, fine. I have a different view on the subject. Okay, but. This is, by the way, the whole notion of a marketplace of ideas. I'm going to disagree with social conservatives on a number of issues, but that's why you have a free market of ideas, as opposed to what the so-called liberals and lefties want, which is basically repression of any ideas with which they disagree. By the way, I also think that social conservatives, as well as some of the more thoughtful establishment conservatives who might be, we might be able to win over, will like the chapter on seizing the moral high ground. Too often, people on the right, Republicans and so forth, are on the defensive. Someone will come and say, well, so how are you going to deal with poverty and this and that, and guarantee that everybody has fill in the blank? Okay. What I do is I say, we shouldn't be on the defensive. We should be going on the moral offensive. And let the other guys sweat. And I have I outline 6 particular arguments that your listeners, when you download the book or buy a copy of it, if you want to do that, can use in your discussions with neighbors, friends, in your local, if you go to your local Republican Party caucus or Tea Party meeting or whatever, look at the 6 moral arguments I make that you can utilize, especially against the lefties. It's my life. We start with that notion. It's not the life. My life doesn't belong to my neighbor. It doesn't belong to government bureaucrats. It belongs to me. We each owe each other respect, not goods and services. One of my favorites is, we're responsible adults. Let's refuse to be treated like helpless children. Because remember, the state is to assume that we're helpless children who can't wipe our nose or tie our shoes without their help. But they can't say to us that they consider us to be that stupid. So they basically have to instill an entitlement-based mentality in people and so forth. There's a way to turn that around so that the lefties are forced to say, well, no, I really do think that people are that stupid. And I mean, you force them to put up, their true beliefs, which they're going to be very reticent to do. Take pride in your achievements. You wonder why Obama was so big on saying, you didn't build that? Because imagine this. We are all creators. That's how humans survive. Whether you're nurturing a child to maturity or a business to profitability, whether you're writing a song or a poem or a business plan or a dissertation, whether you're laying the bricks to a building or designing it or arranging for its finances, these are acts of creation that call upon the best within you acts of creation of which you should be proud. Now, imagine this. As a father, what would I do if somebody tried to assault or molest my children? Well, I'd basically pull their heart out of their friggin' chest is what I would do.
Right
now,
on.
Imagine if you thought of your own life the way you thought of your children, or if you thought of your all the things you create in your life, because they are your spiritual children after all, okay? What would happen if a politician came and tried to molest your life, your business, your home, your everything? Imagine a population instilled with that kind of sense. I mean, the politicians would have to run and hide to keep from getting themselves torn to pieces. Take a look at that section on how to use pride to rout the statists and the lefties. Don't be guilt-tripped into sanctioning your destroyers. Too many people get guilt-tripped. And since you mentioned about the transition earlier in our discussion, put forward the vision of a society in which all of us do the things that we love, the things that I've just mentioned. In that kind of a society where we all do the things that we love, where we're all free to create, as we wish, as long as we're doing it through mutual consent and not initiating force against another, we're going to create a world, a society, in which we are all enriched and educated and entertained and enlightened and inspired by our fellows. There will be a synergy of living in a society like that, where you wake up in the morning and you say, I love my life and what I'm doing, and isn't it great to look at my neighbors and see all the wonderful things they're doing? Boy, that's life. That's the kind of society that we can hold out, as opposed to the battle, the Hobbesian war of all against all, where everyone is simply fighting for politics, where everything is politicized, where, as you say, cronyism is rampant, and we're simply using power to beat our neighbors over the head and steal from them. Look at that positive vision that I present in the moral chapter, and use that if you really want to go on the offensive.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points that you're bringing up here. We talked about this a little bit yesterday when we were talking about the book, but I think what it really comes down to is you are engaged in a battle between the individual and the collective. Because what the progressives have done, when you go through this list here of it being my life and owing people respect, I'm an adult, I won't be treated like a child, pride in your achievements, not being guilt-tripped into sanctioning the destroyers, fighting for a society based on harmony of interest rather than surrender to one based on conflict and force. We're talking about the individual over the collective. Ed, you've been generous with your time. Can you stay for one more segment? Is that okay?
I absolutely can do that. Yep.
Let's do that. You can call in. We'll take some of your calls and allow you to ask Ed some of your questions this afternoon. We'll be back after the jump. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show. Glad that you're with us. Let me give you the number to call in if you'd like to chat with our guest today, Ed Hudgins with the Atlas Society. He is the editor of a book by the Atlas Society called The Republican Party's Civil War, Will Freedom Win? We've been talking to him for the last hour here and thought I would give him a chance to answer some of your questions, because really this is about strategy and how do you build coalition more than anything. The number to call in is 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. And if you go to benswan.com/radio, that's where you're listening. We have the number there as well. And Ed, I really do think it does come down to an issue of building coalitions and working together. We can either all stand apart and lose, or we can start to come together and win. And Zach, you had a question for Ed.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a two-parter on this one, Ed. How can we trace this this schism, if you will, in the GOP back to a particular point? How long has this little internal struggle been going on? And that might tell us, what we're looking at as far as how to get out of it, how to heal this this rift. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, actually, in fact, in the first chapter, I actually traced through how the Republican Party evolved from a coalition that Ronald Reagan put together of what you call libertarian conservatives. Traditional libertarian conservatives tended to be very positive about human nature, sort of children of the Enlightenment. You had more sort of social conservative, and therefore who believed in limited government, rule of law, and you had also more traditional conservatives who were kind of suspicious of human nature, thought there needed to be a lot of checks and balances, and therefore believed with the libertarians in limited government and rule of law. And you had a very interesting coalition, and you had social conservatives who tended to sort of overlap these groups. But what happened was you had a growth in the last couple of decades of two groups. One is the social conservatives who give priority to an agenda for limiting liberty, and this is most important, the neoconservatives. Neoconservatives who have become part of the what I would call the establishment conservatives today, actually believe big government is a good thing. Take a look at the quotes in the book from these guys. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, where they basically say, we neoconservatives believe that, yes, the government that should be engineering society. We just want it to be done in the name of our views as opposed to the views of the leftists. And so it was in the 80s and the 90s, as the influence of the neoconservatives grew, that you had these statists and these crony capitalist Republicans grow up. And again, take a look at some of the quotes. I have quotes from Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater that hopefully your readers will be standing on the chairs cheering when they read. And then I have some quotes from neoconservatives that I think they'll be booing. So take a look at that in the book.
You know, one of the things that is very interesting to me when we talk about neoconservatives versus the social conservatives, look, the neocons have completely duped many of the social conservatives on so many issues. And the one that really comes to mind for me goes back to the 2004 election. John Kerry, George W. Bush, and the architect, Karl Rove, coming up with this strategy that says, you know what we need to do? We need a constitutional amendment on marriage. And they get all these social conservatives, especially in Ohio, who were, jumping up and down and going crazy trying to get this thing to happen. Bush gets reelected, and then the whole idea of this, constitutional marriage amendment vanishes into the mist. It's like it's nothing more than a campaign slogan, and it's like they throw out this little carrot to the social conservatives and say, "No, look, we're on your side, we're on your side," and they're not on their side. It's just how much can we get you to fall into line?
That's right. Now, by the way, I happen to disagree with that. I'm glad it went by the wayside, but the point, your point is absolutely right, is that this was manipulation. This was, remember, why would Karl Rove and those guys have to do this? Well, it was because there were a lot of traditional conservatives as well as libertarian conservatives and others who were disappointed with the Bush administration because it was becoming a big government administration. Yes, it cut taxes. That was good. Yes, it was talking about privatizing Social Security or allowing for private accounts. That was good. It also decided to get the federal government even more involved in education. It decided that it wanted to get the federal government even more involved in health care. It was doing all of these big government neoconservative things. By the way, since you mentioned, where things came from and where things started, even though, the biggest chapters in the book are by me, there are a few chapters by some other scholars. David Mayer, who's a scholar in Ohio, has a piece called Completing the American Revolution. So for those of you who are very interested in the Constitution and the Declaration, take a look at David's chapter. He's a constitutional scholar. Take a look at David Kelly, another David, who's the founder of our organization, his piece on the Fourth Revolution, the need for a moral revolution to undergird the freedom that we have. Take a look at Walter Donway's piece on crony capitalism versus making money, addressing exactly the point that we've discussed earlier in the show. So you'll get a lot of this background as well as the current politics if you get a copy of this book.
Well, and that's exactly the point, right? That a lot of these ideas that are raised in this book, you're not going to find those in current, even I think conservative media. Because it doesn't fit into the paradigm. What you guys are doing is blowing up the whole system. You're not reforming the system. You're blowing it up and saying it is so heavily entrenched by these crony forces. It is so heavily entrenched by political forces that have no desire in looking out for individual liberty or freedom. It's about figuring out who the slaves will serve this time. And which interests they will serve. And so, I think what you guys are doing is so remarkable. But again, it comes back to this generational issue. How do we get young people in America to begin to adopt these ideas? Because I think, look, some of these issues begin to take care of themselves over time. Progressives are very smart about saying, if you're over the age of, 45 or 50 years old, we don't care about you. You can continue to believe what you want to believe. We're going after where the kids are coming from, where the students are, because we know in a couple generations they will have fully adopted our belief system. How do we, Ed, work to do the exact same thing and restore the idea of the individual to young people?
Well, two things. First of all, as I indicated, most individuals, most young people are frustrated with the current system. Many of them voted for Obama because he looked like a breath of fresh air and not some dissembling politician. And yet, many of them now are turning away from him because they see, well, he was just another, all talk, dishonest politician. Young people long for a vision of the kind of world in which they want to live. They want to see something positive. I mean, I like to say when we were young, I consider myself still young at heart, okay? But that's what we can offer with this vision of how society should be. Most of these young people appreciate already the power of the human mind and what free markets can do, because most of them are communicating in ways that you and I never did. They're using smartphones, they're using tablets. They've seen in their own lifetimes the incredible changes that have happened in communications and information because of the free market and because of entrepreneurs, because of your Steve Jobs and your Bill Gates and your people like that. So they've already got the foundations, but they're also socially liberal. They're just not, maybe they do or do not particularly like a particular lifestyle, but it's just not something that they're going to be marching in the streets to ban. They're tolerant. And as long as the Republican Party is looked at as an intolerant party, they're not going to be involved. As long as the Republican establishment gives the back of their hand to Ron Paul supporters, then the young people are going to turn away because they're being told to turn away. And this is suicidal because the demographics, as I show in the book, are all against the GOP today. That's why I'm saying what the GOP needs is a radical realignment. Mike Huckabee said that if the GOP backs same-sex marriage, he would walk and take as many evangelicals as he can. I say, let him walk. The party is better without him. But as I say, social conservatives have to understand that they have a vested interest in staying in the party, or at least I should put it this way, standing for freedom and liberty, because their lifestyles, and their values are going to be attenuated, shall we say, if the forces of Obama and so forth continue. So attracting young people should be the easiest thing, because freedom is the freedom is the optimistic thing. It's freedom that caused millions of immigrants to come to this country, and still does. By the way, we can argue about what the best way to deal with illegal immigrants, but I've got to say to those conservatives who dump on immigrants, and I have a section in the book on this. Immigrants are doing the only moral thing. If you're if you're in Mexico and you're suffering in poverty and you're watching your family suffer, and it takes 20 years to legally get permission to come to the United States, the best thing to do is just to come here and work hard like every American does. That's the American way.
Good stuff. Ed, thanks so much for being with us today. Again, the book is The Republican Party's Civil War, Will Freedom Win? You can download a free copy. FREE, free copy at benswann.com. Thanks again, Ed. Welcome back to the show. It's just spent the last little over an hour and 15 minutes talking with Ed Hudgins of the Atlas Society and their book, The Republican Party's Civil War, Will Freedom Win? And actually, Zach, you had a great quote here. Was it from Barry Goldwater's? Who that was?
Reagan.
Oh, Reagan. Sorry, Ronald Reagan. Go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe perhaps this is in Ed's book. I don't know the context for this. This is without a context, so I apologize. It just says, if you analyze it, I believe the very heart and soul of conservatism is libertarianism. I think conservatism is really a misnomer, just as liberalism is a misnomer for the liberals. If we were back in the days of the revolution, capital R, so-called conservatives today would be the liberals, and the liberals would be the Tories. The basis of conservatism is a desire for less government interference or less centralized authority or more individual freedom, and this is a pretty general description also of what libertarianism is, end quote. So I would love more of an explanation for that, but
sure. Well, even the term classical liberal
right,
doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. They think as soon as they hear liberal, they wait a minute,
bad
slur, slur.
But no, classical liberal is more like a conservative or a libertarian today.
Absolutely. Frederick Bastiat, who wrote the law, I mean, that's a classical liberal. Somebody was telling me, we were down in Florida, as I mentioned, this past weekend for the Liberty Summit, and somebody mentioned that they were at an event with Alan Grayson. And you know who Alan Grayson is. He was that extremely progressive guy from Florida. He was a congressman. And they were at an event with him, and something was said about being a classical liberal. And he had no idea what they were talking about.
Come on,
his staff, they were like all so confused. They didn't know what it was. It's like, what is a classical liberal? We don't know what that is. And then, of course, the classical liberal is the libertarian. It's the person who says individual freedom trumps the collective with the corporatism. And that's what, again, around the world, to the point Ed was making, around the world, I mean, people today, I think we take so for granted what freedom is in this country. Even as fast as it's vanishing in the United States, we take for granted the fact that we still have a measure of freedom. Now, I would not say we have more freedom than every other country, because that's not true. And Ed talks about that World Freedom Index. The United States is way, way low on that list.
Sadly.
I was in Chile last fall, and Chile's like 7th in the world on that list.
Are they really?
They really are. And, it's a cool place to be. But when you talk about economic freedom, I mean, why in the world are Chileans living more freely than Americans are? The problem is that we just are told that we're free, and so we accept that idea. Freedom, liberty. We have freaking stamps in here that say freedom and liberty all over them, right? That we're using in the post office. And we see that mantra, those terms that are used over and over and over again about freedom and liberty, but we just don't live as free people. We just assume that we're free because that's all we've known, and we're told we're free.
Yeah. And it's not splitting hairs to know these terms. It's not nerdy. It's not boring. Maybe okay. I just tell myself that. So I feel more cool. But it's not splitting hairs to know these terms. We've got to sort through these things and get educated. And one of the benefits of Ed's new book is to sort through some of these things and raise awareness, I guess. That's the big thing I draw from it. I will look forward to reading the chapter on taking the moral high ground. I think he called it, going on the offensive. I like that. Sometimes I can be offensive, so why not go on the offensive? So that's good.
Well, and too often I think libertarians are portrayed, and Republicans are portrayed, as being selfish and uncaring about those who are in need.
Yes.
But I think if you step back, and again, as you said, these terms are not just arbitrary. These terms have specific value to them. If you talk about what it means to truly be a libertarian, or what it means to be a Republican who embraces liberty and freedom, it's actually the opposite of being uncaring and selfish. It's about caring about people enough to give them the ability to think and act and live for themselves.
Give them dignity. Give them a hand up.
Exactly.
And Christopher Hitchens, I have a quote from him too on this. He chimes in. It says, "I've always found it quaint and rather touching that there is a movement, meaning libertarians in the U.S., that thinks Americans are not yet selfish enough." I see what he did there. The Christopher Hitchens, of course, the famed philosopher and atheist and progressive. I would say.
Well, and he does. He believes that libertarianism is about me, about becoming enriched on my own. And, for lack of a better term, how stupid to refer to people who just want to be able to live freely as being selfish, instead of allowing themselves to have some overseer or master in the form of a crony system that says these few people will enrich themselves and create laws and rules and regulations by which to bind everyone else. They'll call them consumer protections. They'll call them ways of looking out for you. They'll call it collectivism so that we're all in this together. But we're not all in this together. When you have an aristocracy in Washington, D.C. that does not live by the rules that they pass and impose on the American people, that is aristocracy. That is not representative government.
And it's what happens when you start with a worldview that does not believe that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that rights don't come from God or
from nature. Yeah,
they come from Peter King.
Exactly. Or they
we haven't mentioned him in a week or so.
We got to get his recording. We've got to get his recording and play it. I think we have Fred from Georgia is on the line. Fred, we got a few minutes here. What's up?
Good morning, gentlemen, and thanks for the book, Ed.
Ed is actually gone now.
Oh, he is? Okay. Well, maybe he'll hear it later.
Sorry about that.
That's no problem. I had a comment and a suggestion on strategy. I guess my comment is another way of stating what Ed is stating, is that Republicans and Democrats are both fine with breaking the law. They only differ in what unauthorized authority they want to exert over us.
It's very true.
By my read, the only thing the Congress should be doing domestically is promoting business, setting standards for business, and preventing invasions. But as far as the strategy suggestion is, you really can't have your cake and eat it too in the Republican or Libertarian parties by making the national platform devoid of any moral laws, because Congress isn't supposed to be passing moral laws as far as to enforce what morality and personal behaviors. That's at a state level. But they can do that at the state level. So the parties can honestly go forth and say, at the national level, here's what we say. And at the local level, if you want to change for or against drugs, for or against abortion, whatever, do that there. Do it at the state level.
Well, yeah, and when you do it at the state level, and even lower than that, when you do it at the local level, right, but that's where the individual people have the most power.
Exactly.
So you really do have representative government, because if people living in a certain area say, this is what we want, we don't want this or we want that, and you can always vote with your feet by moving into the next county or crossing the state line if you dislike that. And some people don't like that because they say, well, then we'd end up with all these states they're all over the place and they all have different views, and that's not good. I don't think that's not good. I think that's great.
No,
people are different.
It's 50 laboratories, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Anyways, I'll enjoy the book, and thanks for having them on.
Glad that you downloaded it. And while you're at it, Fred, tell some of your friends to get on there and download it as well, and to share it. Because, again, this is a book that I think is beginning to step into, and we talked about this during the break, Zach, finding some solutions for common ground, which is a difficult thing to do. It is not easy to find solutions for common ground in this day and age. And when you can find them, and I think these 6 steps that Ed lays out are great ways of having those conversations. Now, some of you out there will say, yeah, I already knew that. I already knew, it's my life. Well, that's true, but it goes beyond that. It's not just saying, it's my life, leave me alone. You know what I think Ed has done? I think Ed has put a lot of meat behind a very simple phrase that we use, which is that humanity is greater than politics. And so it can't just be about me. It has to be about me, and it's about you. It's about me fighting for you and standing up for you and working to make sure that you have opportunity in your life. And you know what, friend? That includes opportunity for mistakes and bad choices. And I will defend your right to make bad choices for your life so that I can make good choices for mine. And I think that's one thing we have to begin to embrace. And again, in a collectivist system, we don't like that idea, because when you say that to people, it makes them uncomfortable. No, we can't just let people make bad choices, because it will hurt all of us. Collectivists have created a system where we socialize the risk of the individual. We need to reverse that trend. We privatize the risk taken by the private individual so that the risk is theirs and theirs alone. And then we do everything in our power to help them, to succeed, to move forward, to live in a prosperous, healthy, spiritually good life as best we possibly can. Did we do it? Did we solve all the world's problems in the last few hours?
We've got to begin to start. The times are desperate. We've got to begin to make inroads. Even if we stumble along the way, and bumble our way through it. We've got to begin to do it. We can't afford not to.
Right on. For Zach Bohannon and Ben Swann, thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, 12 to 2 Eastern. When we're not on air, you can find us online at benswann.com, where humanity is greater than politics.